starting this, is it the first? It's the second session of the day. So we speak of the art of living, not the science of living. Design is an art form that contains lessons on healthy and sustainable living. Our program today will uncover how design advocates for social change. We will also present real-case scenarios and studies that improve lives and environmental experiences. So let me, I need just to find more. Today, I think we are talking about having a very deep insight discussion. It's the last one of, I think, four sessions with Morphosis Architects. Morphosis is bringing, in a very particular way, art and architecture. Doodles, art form that stem their project, the drawing, the models as mock-ups, the petit part, that all get integrated in their design. Morphosis claims, and that's why I wanted to highlight, that they want to showcase the duality and the ability to walk the line between scientific approach and the artistic approach. A scientific approach, it's result-driven, it's leading towards rational, finite, focused results. When the artistic, it's focused more on the process itself and produce additional question. You resolve, actually you find another question. And those ambiguity, those multiple options, all those small encounter are as many change to actually discover something new and unknown. So today, because it's the fourth question, I will again invite two of our speakers, because we want to also have an analysis of what did happen during these 5 days now. So let me introduce the speakers. This insight will be provided by Kerenza. For some of you, you already have seen her or met her, but for the one who didn't know her, she oversees advanced computational design and simulation and all projects at Morphosis. Her team focuses on the research and development and the integration of technology into the design, the construction process, using diverse software, including ours, Dassault Systèmes, Katia. She's also a member, a faculty member of the Southern California Institute of Architecture, called the SCI Arc. It kind of make it CARC. I want to just making sure we get this acronym right. Well, she's teaching, focusing on these digital design tools and construction tools in the design process. So she's basically preparing the practice of future architects and designers. We will be also having Eric Meyers. He's a designer. He's specializing in fabrication, and he's actually running this very important shop called X Tech. Actually, X and crossroads and tech are also very clear in meaning. So please welcome on stage Kerenza and Eric for this great deep dive discussion. So maybe let's start by just coming back to the genesis of this exhibit. We basically get ourselves on the phone. We were questioning what Morphosis will do or may do when it comes to do regenerative design. That was the main topic for the whole week. And today we are just focusing on the art of living. And in the art of living, it means that to receive the installation and to enjoy the experience with it. So first, maybe, Kerenza, you may give us a little, presentation of what did proceed, or how you did proceed for this installation, and that we may come back to how basically it happens in our way of doing it.
I think that in some ways we're always looking at an evolution in the way we design, in the way we think, but absolutely in the way we see and the way we experience. And we are at a point in use of technologies in architecture and other industries where the tools have been around long enough that we can begin to really think of them as a fully part of us, and they are
almost
embedded.
like a partner,
yes,
like
embedded,
another member of the team.
Exactly. It's like breathing air. You don't notice it anymore, but you're using it every day. Mm-hmm. And so one of the ways that we wanted to bring this installation to light during this session was to really look at how we can integrate, simulate, and immerse bodies into the experience. And, you know, we talk a lot about personal customization of experience, how each individual sees the world today. And so I think the installation plays around with that a little bit as well. It allows the viewers to not just be viewing it, but also playing with it and discovering it. And particularly the idea of chance, right? So we have 3 panels that are rotating. Encounters, yes, that's right.
French.
We have 3 panels that are rotating, and they each kind of tell a part of the story. Several, actually. And so recombining, connecting, isolating, rotating, all these different, you know, kind of qualifier begin to bring a more dynamic relationship to the work that we're doing. Now, the content of this installation in general combines a series of processes and tools. It's as if we're opening our brains in the black box of architecture to really start to kind of delve into the representation, visualization, but also the integration of data, factual information. And obviously all of this has been stylized and really kind of plays also the role of art. It's a beautiful installation. It's something that you can experience just as a thing that you go to see in a museum. And then you can delve, again, privately, individually, more into what this thing might mean to you and what it starts to reveal.
So Eric, you know, you being a very important person for this installation, because what I discover, I'm a car designer by practice, I'm a practitioner, and what really strikes me along this process is the intensity, the intense level of prototyping, this back and forth movement, not only on the process of design, on the virtual moment where you imagine the possibilities, but also how do you go back to the physicality, the real physicality of our body and also our hands. And so you lead this X-Tech department shop. And what struck me when I was looking, you know, all of your practice, you know, milling and developing, printing and so on, I felt like home in the shop in the car design. And I thought, that's something interesting, that some of the practice are basically converging in some ways between architecture and mass production design. Any comment about that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really sensitive point that you're making. I think the process of making something real and taking it from digital to physical is something that all designers today are confronting with. And so for us at X-Tech, when we're working with materials, we're using the digital models to support a physical production process in the sense that the physical is ultimately how we engage with it, whether it's an automobile or a space. Ultimately, the design process can be uncertain at so many levels, whether the economics are uncertain, the client is uncertain, there are different directions that different stakeholders in the project have. That was something that we experienced on the design of this project, where there were multiple entities that each had a different idea about what the installation would become. And so in some ways, prototyping physically helps to show what ideas take weight.
I think it does more than showing. It builds trust along the way. I remember the beginning, we had this big Tom Main, umbrella vision. And then we started to discuss, and what suddenly we realized is the ambition was really broad, and we were going to the unknown. We knew the space, we knew the topic, the content, the visualizing the design process, yet the question came up as how? So what did happen at this moment at Morphosis with this, okay, great, we're going to do this installation in Via Tortona with Dassault Systèmes and the design studios, and what happened? I want to know what is the intellectual process, the feeling, the emotional connection to the work.
I won't speak for Carenza, but I know for me there was a very deep connection to the process. We were working on this project virtually nonstop for the past 6 months, and the project changed a number of times. At one point, the enclosure that was holding the panels was actually something much more formal and shaped,
yes.
using the software. And Tom Main himself resisted the notion of making an object as a box to hold the panels, because the content of the projection is really the significant aspect of this installation.
Like the box will be basically making a filter to the extreme density of information. You wanted to actually, that's what we see with the application, by the way, the AR, where you wanted this information to actually spread all over the space, right? So we see that our brain goes faster than any technology or device can actually provide. So that's kind of that, dialogue that makes things very interesting.
But I think what you guys are also asking is a lot of big questions that cover a lot of different things that are almost impossible to answer in one way. And so when you ask for iconic sculpture or architectural sculpture that responds to all of these questions in some way, there's an impossibility there. And there's potentially a little bit of a, not short-sightedness, but kind of a one-liner answer. And I think we don't like to give answers, and we certainly don't like to give one solution. We enjoy the idea that the architecture is creating the conversation, provoking question.
The dialogue.
And the dialogue, and also changing potentially the way you evolve.
You may
in
start
it.
at the beginning.
And positive or negative, we don't care, right? Ultimately, there has to be, we have to have a reason for living and operating in this world, and it's not just to make shelter for generic human beings. And I think we like the architecture to be part of the conversation, if not the initiator in some ways.
But this is huge. It is huge because in reality, people still think the old modernism posture, attitude of the architect that knows what he has to do, place it, know for the others, where suddenly, with all of those complexity that we want to tackle, we are getting into another aspect of the design process that is not the overt one. It's what is happening in our inner processing, information, imagining. This is what everybody does, but now we are doing it with the people we are receiving. Your materiality aspect is, okay, at any step of the way, you are creating that inner journey to anyone who sees it, whether they are members of your team or the users, the citizen, the people who will be basically in this building or coming here for this experience. What did change? You're talking about there are so many ways to actually express all this diversity. How do you, as a maker, bringing those things in physicality, how do you get access to those processes? How do you combine those processes? Do you gather talent? Do you dawdle yourself with material? How does
it's a number of things.
What is your life in the X-Tech?
I think one thing that often doesn't get discussed is the role of chance encounter in design decisions, and
the surprise.
The surprise, talking on the phone with your friend, and your friend saying, hey, let's go do this tonight, let's go check something out, and you go and you see a material, or you have a conversation with somebody that you otherwise would not have about a certain material to use, which ultimately ends up being the material of choice for a large project. I mean, for our case, the aluminum composite was a material we had no idea how to use, how to manage the material, but it was just a by the cuff suggestion from a friend, why don't you try this? And we tried it, we explored it, and we found the limits of the material, and we found the constraints of the material such that we could leverage those constraints to a possible outcome.
So this is it. There are nothing that you had in mind and you built and then you propose. It's always this kind of completely impromptu serendipity of getting a conversation with a friend and a material.
Which can be really frustrating for type A personalities, right?
Yes, it is.
No, but I think the bigger picture is that we're deconstructing the given problems into a series of systems, right? Formal, not formal, it's about ideas, it's sometimes about performance, and these systems then can be kind of generated, launched at each other, and they interact in a sometimes very complex way, and something starts to emerge from that. So the chance encounter that we're discussing, they're almost planned. There's this kind of dichotomy, right, between us engineering a chance encounter and then just something happening without any kind of infrastructure around it in a way, right?
So it's very interesting because you are saying that because we are getting to more complexity, we have to change the way we interact in the design process, the interactive between virtual and real. But what you are saying is we are reframing in some ways some of what we used to do, focus on the object, but in a larger scale. You know, like basically, let's say, okay, we're going to frame the city. Then we will see what we do inside instead of just like when before we were framing an object, right? The building, the car, whatever. So this is because the machine and the technology and computational capabilities are here to do so. Yet, how do we frame such a complex thing? This is a complex object. We didn't know how it would look like. We had to frame it up front, right?
I mean, I think that in some ways it's a natural process.
Yeah.
In some way,
It's a human survival process.
There's an organic movement. I mean, I think that given the same kind of constraint, we could build a tower, a bunker, or a pavilion, right? Let's just say, for example. So it has shifted the focus from a finite one-moment solution that everybody's working towards to the process beyond it, right? Before that. And ultimately, we can generate millions, like an infinite numbers of iterations of that building or whatever we're building. And then the choice of what is the one that comes into play is often either subjective or very specific in nature, but ultimately you could just kind of swipe it and go to the next one, right? So the technology integration in the process has really shifted the role of the architect from a form maker to a thinker, right? And because now we're becoming these kind of, I would say, greater thinker, dealing with more complex problems, we're developing these languages that are answers to problems that are more generic than architectural. That means that if we think about architecture not as a building, but as a place of interaction, as a moment in space, as a part of a city, as a part of a network in the world, and on and on, the process of creation and the thinking that goes behind it is the same. And the process has, as I said before, the language has been established, and it's allowing us to play on a variety of facets of the problem. Yeah?
You know, we have this discussion earlier this week with Mario Carpo, and we were discussing about this, the designer or the architect toward the object, and today going toward the objectile, like projection. In French, you push it away, or Italian. So this is really what you say is, we are still having the same attitude. It's just that we just have to be interactor with a new sets of given. They could be data, virtual or physical. I was just wondering one thing. Since, this is probably the same process, yet we have not been in school, you are faculty, and, I was just considering that moving those architects toward knowing how to frame that complex place, that means becoming interactor, not author of a design, but interactor with a system, a machine, feedback, result, science, and you, the interactor. So you still have this design attitude. And at the same time, this is consuming, and at the same time, you have this shop moment where you have to learn with your hands, with your eyes, with your experience about the material that are natural. They don't behave like machine. They behave like nature. They behave like living organism, and they actually don't do what you expect them to do. How do you, because that's basically create an extension, that's not easy. So how can we imagine to teach architecture in the future in some ways, Stay the hands on the mud and the clay and also talking to computers? Difficult one, but...
well, it's a really good question.
Do you do computer and computational work? You keep doing back and forth.
Back and forth, absolutely. The students that come out of school today are generally doing both to some degree. We are seeing a trend, though, in the sense that a lot of students are not given the kind of prerequisite skills in say, drawing or hand drafting. These are sort of old world ideologies that we carry on as a disciplinary, some would say, burden. But in a lot of ways, the tradition of drawing by hand allows the student to learn how to structure their thinking. And so building a drawing set is not actually just drawing. It's creating a series of relationships that are organized both in space and in time. And so I think the tools of tomorrow, the pedagogical tools of tomorrow will enable students to do that.
I like that because personally from that time, I'm still drawing. And people think drawing is a communication tool. Actually, no. It's an inner journey to your thinking, and it's helping you to actually capitalize, archiving almost all of your emotional connection to natural matter. Or, I was having this conversation earlier with Patrick Join, that is also here. We are that generation that every time we find something, we have this little notebook where we are just, okay, I sketched that because today I find this. And it's ridiculous because today you can capture that into a platform that just like, okay, it was around the period of April. I remember something, an encounter happened in my head. Go there, you find it. So why doing that still when machine does it better? That's a very intriguing question and we should, because it's the way we proceed.
But I think we're older. Right? I think this new generation...
I take it. I accept.
Okay. I think this new generation thinks in a very, very different way. And that hand that you're talking about is now digitally integrated. And the sketch that you're talking about is a computational allegory.
Exactly.
And
yes.
so I think that there is a transition, and I think we like the craft of it, the tactile, that's a human kind of behavior, and that's what we like. But I do think that we are seeing a really important and essential shift in the way that these new generation actually are almost in symbiosis with the machine. And so, yes, of course, there's the calculation, the infinite possibilities and all of that, but I do think that on the individual idea, the hand sketch and the gesture, all of that is now in a
integrated into my own inner process of thinking. Drawing was helping me to think. They do it with the machine and think differently. Correct. Your application, the IR application, also have a brush, and I thought that very intriguing. It actually did intrigue me because it was almost making the link of how do I draw with the digital data, considering digital data as a material, and then suddenly, I reconnect with the material and the installation, because actually it was profoundly human. You know, it's just the manifestation of what I do that is different, but it's the same. By the way, my two sons are always behind screen and I'm wondering what they do. Now I know. So, any question from the audience? Just to keep having this conversation. And again, you know, this is the last opportunity to discuss about the installation. So, any question you may have.
Yes.
Just to keep the conversation also with the audience.
Hello. I
Hello.
just popped in here 5 minutes. I was listening to you, but I didn't have the introduction, so I might put questions which I have been already answered to. I'm a sales agent for design furniture in France, and whenever I visit my clients, the question is, who is our final buyer? How does he live? How does he function? And we have come to the conclusion that in the reality, we don't need any furniture anymore. That only the most essential ones. And the reason is that our target client is somebody who is very dynamic, creative. He is always moving around. So when he comes back from his work home, he will not kill his time in front of a television set or in social meetings. He will play with his children. He will maybe have a piano, playing piano. He might be connected to NASA and he's looking at the latest amounts. So the life in our avant-garde houses is just to create the space so that the people can be creative on their own. That means they need space. That means we throw out all the fixed furniture.
The
fixed
stuff.
furniture. No,
get rid of the stuff.
only the essential ones, you know. But they must be folding or on wheels, pushing them around, and the synthesis between sculpture, I mean Giacometti, Henri Moore, you know, not exactly this, but the information, and so colors, sculptures moving around, and this is the philosophy on our design furniture market.
Thank you. Though it was more a comment than but I definitely agree. This is. Do you have any comment to add? This is basically the intent, the dematerialization for only. Maybe we just have some surrounding wave around us, interacting with the environment as being part of it. I don't want to just, I mean, it's the time for you to, maybe if you have any comment on this philosophy.
I'm definitely biased on a physical world sense, and I differ maybe from Carenza here in the sense that I don't believe that...
You want stuff? You want still some hard things around you?
I think having the ability to touch and with our hands is, and sense something with our bodies is a very human characteristic. So to remove that through a technological process will only dehumanize the world.
But what if we don't remove it, we just replicate it in a different way? Like haptics and simulation. I mean, imagine you want to, we talked a little bit about that earlier in the week, but we're looking at sending men on Mars, right? The gravity, the environmental condition will change how you perceive sound, how you taste, how you breathe, how you walk around. The social structure might be different. The touch of a chair of material might be different. And so we're developing these technologies that are able to simulate and fool your brain into thinking that you are 100% experiencing that. And it includes haptics, meaning touch, and it can include smell, taste, and obviously the visual one is the most important. The sound is important as well. So I'm not necessarily denigrating the craft because I think it's super important and I love it as well. But I do believe that we are moving towards the ability to virtually simulate almost anything.
You know, I like this paradigm of the chair because we have a very super light chair here. We may one day never have to sit anymore. this is very interesting. You know, we are having a chair because we are tired and we need to sit to get away from the weight of our body. But the feeling we have with water, by example, is an incredible feeling. It's personally very personal. We may imagine that with data, we will considering another relationship with matter. The matter will being reorganized on the solid and liquid and gas, we say, level, completely different. Within the technology, we can get to the data to the level of scale of actually the atom, and maybe even further down. And we may see designers and architects design matter to that level that will make our living surrounding completely, I will say, on a serendipity level, you know, where we will be like just moving in a liquid or a gas. And I mean, I'm just like making it without necessarily going to Mars, but maybe we will know. No, but you're right.
I do think those are critical conversation because we are questioning what makes us human. We're questioning what are our emotions linked to, right? So when we evolve in a space, there might be a combination of your own history, light touching something, a space being in a certain
of our experiences.
So I do think that even though I'm enthusiastically embracing evolving into immersive spaces and looking at these new technologies that allow us to have a different point of view, discover something in a different way, and or shape it in a different way in some instances, it is not a clear. I mean, you can see in kind of the movies, sci-fi of upcoming, you know, kind of live scenarios, future scenarios, that it is not yet a clear-cut process, and that we need to ask these questions, and we need to understand what are the implications and what it may transform us into, and we may not like it, that's for sure.
So that means that all the effort of the modernism to actually try to make nature material to our hand were probably wrong. We should work on ourselves. I mean, like our thinking, because we will always involve our surrounding. We already did. We work in an artificial world right now. All of what we have surrounding us is not much about nature. So maybe we should start to basically focusing on how we think our environment and art of living, than just like only focusing on continuing the long-lasting tradition of considering nature, object, material as something outside of ourselves that we should just basically interact with. That's pretty much what this whole week is all about. I mean, showing this new interaction with those. And we're probably at the beginning. I'm pretty sure we are. And the question is how we will be evolving as humans.
Right, I think we're definitely at the beginning of understanding our connection to nature. And at some point, you know, there's been a distinction through history of humans versus nature, but with the Anthropocene thesis, there's an understanding that there's no place on Earth that has not been untouched by humans. And so what that tells us is we are connected to nature.
We're just one.
We are completely one, and you can experience this whether you're in your house in a completely urban environment or you go to a national park in the United States where there's a very distinct relationship to the natural resources of the planet. We curate these environments in a certain way, but the natural environment that we knew through modernity it's an image in a way. It's
maybe behind us now.
It's behind us.
Yes. I think we have a burning second question.
Hello. Burning, yes. The empty space where other people will be creative.
Can you please keep the microphone?
Like this?
Yes, so like that we can hear you.
Okay. This is just the physical thing of how they live. You know, they do things, and the question is, why do they do the things they do? And so I'm very much in contact with the philosophy and especially the existentialism to Jean-Paul Sartre, and the actual society is facing le néant, you know, the nothing, and the question is, how can we give a sense. And Sartre says, l'existence précède l'essence. And what he did not know, he wrote this book in 1943. What did he know is that the progress in neuroscience and informatique, now we know that the world which is coming every day to us, Sartre said, le monde qui nous arrive, is filtered by our bodies. Sartre didn't know this. So our bodies are constituted by physiognomy, by all the emotions, our love lights, our accidents, and so on. So the world arrives every morning, and part of the world which is arriving are filtered and erased. Only what your body would like to have will enter the brain and would be put into the different cases of your brain. That means, other words, that we are developing, each of us, a personal hard top, that we have our own conscience. Everybody has a particular and unique hard top. So the question is, how can you live with this anéantisation? That means that word which arrives will anéanti what you have already had in your brain.
Yeah, but what, I mean, you...
I finished with 2 minutes per sentence. So the answer is, in knowing that everything will be erased and there will be an empty space for us to conquer. Or why should we conquer it? The answer is with some very simple words, that you have two possibilities to face this situation. The first one is to buy you a gun and shoot yourself. In 10th of a second, you have no problem of existence. If you decide in your own freedom to live this life, then it would be stupid to be in a room and to cry and to suffer and so on.
Okay.
So if you just a second.
No, but just you have to understand that this is the...
La dernière phrase, c'est très important. Donc, si vous décidez de vivre cette vie, il serait donc logique que vous devez vivre une vie la plus dynamique, la plus créative, la plus amoureuse. Sinon, ça ne vaut pas la peine. Donc,
se centrer sur l'humain.
Donc, vive la vie, bordel.
Oui, vive la vie, très bien. Mais c'est exact. It's just what we try to do here. It's basically given some means for basically human to actually being the successful participant to our art of living in the future. But yet, any question for Morphosis and related to the installation, we may discuss later on coffee. I may go back with Deleuze on this subject of existentialism and objective. So any questions that this is the last opportunity to ask this question to Morphosis Architects, that first and foremost, I would like to thank you in public about this great work and this great collaboration we have, just because it is not about doing an object. It was really about a design process. It was about discovering each other. It was a great mind working together. I remember at the very beginning, we didn't know where we were going. We didn't know. We were just discovering along the way how this would basically happen. It's probably the best what we couldn't do in 5 months. And I'm sure just not something finished. It's just the beginning of a long, long conversation, interaction with what is our living environment today. Any last questions? Someone here?
Yes, thank you. I was thinking maybe you were talking about national parks in the US. There's, for me, with my very personal viewpoint, there's an aspect about saying what did exist in the US before, what did exist in Africa, in Asia, in lots of regions that we may want to reconnect with and let them talk again, because the relationship with the environment and nature, of course, is different depending on the culture. And I think there is also a need to learn from other cultures and other regional areas. Maybe that's something that Toshiko Mori is going to talk on in the next talk, because she's done some very exciting work, I believe, in Africa without trying to bring too much of an external viewpoint into the continent.
So what is the
for you?
Thank you. So the contribution from different local culture into your work.
We are always looking outward to other places to get different point of view.
You work in different places, by the way.
We approach everything as if we know nothing, right?
Right.
In a way. So in his case, if it's about a material, we will go in and ask a fabricator, how do you do this? Or we'll go in, if we have a client or even local community, as you're saying, we have no ego in that way. We understand that we are one piece of the puzzle. Architecture is a collaborative practice. We are not.
So you put the people from the region to the process.
Yeah, you up to somewhere in the 70s, even the 80s, you could practice architecture as the one sole person, and everything is kind of revolving about this one character. It's no longer possible, and so the shift is occurring in that way as well, where it's becoming a collective, an incubator that just sucks in everything that they can think of, even from filmmaking, history, political culture, anything that we can bring in to enrich the system. Because we talk about complexity, but we should also talk about richness and the kind of the real make of this. Yeah, and if we think about creating architecture as a series of systems, the richer and the more complete picture that we can get for each of these elements, the more interesting combination and results we may get from it.
You probably do the same in your X-Tech, right? Gather the material and trying the material from the local region,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So you built something in the desert, you just take the sun and you do it without water, right?
Yeah, you spend 2 weeks alone in the desert building your own shelter. Well.
Yes, makes sense. Well, okay, so I think we're done. You have one more question?
Yes. I've had the chance to follow all your sessions this week, and you've been showcasing this amazing installation. And I wanted to know what's the key takeaway you will give to the audience today. You give different inputs each day with a different thematic, and what's the key takeaway you want to share with us after this amazing week?
I would say for me, the key takeaway is that digital environments are not operating in isolation. Digital environments affect the real world, and it is important that we consider real-world implications when we use these design environments that are robust and possible to connect many disconnected pieces. To know that a real-world implication exists, real-world application exists, that can be maybe the most important thing for me.
And if human is nature, we want human to be part of the system, and it's an ecosystem. We are at a point where we should be able to really work in symbiosis with the machine, and then the machine does some things very, very well, and then some things not so well. It's our kind of hand into the process that allows us to kind of take it to the next level, for sure.
So symbiosis between machine and humans. Thank you, both of you. That's been great. I see you. Thank you for this session, and thank you for this experience we had together. Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you, Anne.